Okay, let's dive right into this expliker. We're stepping back into one of the most profoundly emotional and historically weighty moments in Islamic history. So I want you to step back in time with me for a second. It's the 7th of Muharram. Picture the vast, completely unforgiving desert of Karbala. The golden hour light is cutting through the dust, but there is absolutely no peace here. What we're looking at is a tense, incredibly heavy standoff. On one side, you have Imam Hussein, standing as a representation of absolute truth, and on the other, a massive army. And the truly heartbreaking part? It's made up of the exact same people who had just written to him, begging him to come. You know, the historical accounts from this day describe this palpable tension in the air. The burning sands of Karbala were literally scorching under the sun, but the real heat, that was in the hearts of the men standing across from Imam Hussein. A restless wind is sweeping through the crowd, carrying this strange, unspoken anxiety. Everyone there could sense the sheer gravity of what was coming. Yet nobody truly realized that before a single sword was drawn, Imam Hussein was about to confront them with something far more piercing than an arrow. He was going to remind them of their own words. Because this wasn't just a question of swords, it was a question of conscience, or as it's profoundly known, the Zamir. Imam Hussein understood that this impending clash wasn't just some physical fight over power, it was a deeply spiritual and moral reckoning. The men standing before him didn't just have weapons in their hands, they had betrayal in their hearts. And to truly understand the heavy silence that's about to fall over this desert, we have to look at exactly what led up to this moment. Which brings us to Section 1. Letters from Kufa, the promises made. Let's move through this timeline and see how this builds. Because to grasp the full weight of the silence on the 7th of Muharram, we really have to look backward at the immense promises that set this whole journey into motion. It starts with thousands of impassioned letters sent from the people of Kufa. They were all carrying the exact same desperate message. O Imam Hussein, come to Kufa, we will support you, we will give our lives for you. Trusting these pleas, he dispatched his emissary, Muslim bin Aqil. And initially, the people pledged unshakable support. But then, fear took over. When the threat of worldly power and severe consequences was put in front of them, their devotion just vanished. And that leads us to the devastating final reality. Grand promises, completely broken on the battlefield of Karbala. And this stark contrast brilliantly illustrates that staggering display of hypocrisy. Men who had just penned these words of ultimate sacrifice, literally pledging their lives in ink, are now standing shoulder to shoulder with the enemy. But think about their posture for a second. Their eyes are lowered in deep shame. They aren't looking at Imam Hussein with the fierce, confident gaze of warriors. No, they're looking at the ground with the heavy guilt of men who know exactly what they've done. Let's move to Section 2. A question of conscience. Awakening the Zamir. So, bringing our narrative back to that 10th standoff in the blistering heat, Imam Hussein looks out at this vast army. And the crucial point here is how they react. When the grandson of the Prophet stood before them, these men actively avoided his gaze. Their heads were bowed low in paralyzing shame. Many were just watching silently from a distance, trying to sort of disappear into the crowd. They weren't just running from Imam Hussein, you see. They were running from their own promises, from their own faith. Recognizing this overwhelming guilt, Imam Hussein made a profoundly spiritual decision. Before the clash of swords, he chose to awaken their conscience. He stepped forward, not drawing a weapon to incite them, but drawing upon absolute truth to pierce their souls. He knew that the ultimate victory wouldn't be won by drawing blood, but by exposing the reality of their broken faith. This takes us to Section 3, the Prophet's grandson, the ultimate reminder. What follows is honestly one of the most historic and deeply emotional speeches ever recorded. Imam Hussein addresses this massive crowd, his voice carrying across the desert winds. "O people," he says, "I am Hussein, the son of Ali, the son of Fatima." Just pause and think about that. With just those few words, he anchored them directly to the very foundation of their religion. He's reminding them of his undeniable divine lineage. He wasn't some stranger they were fighting. He was the flesh and blood of the household they prayed to and revered every single day. He then asks them this incredibly heavy question. Do you not know that Fatima is the leader of the women of paradise? Try to feel the spiritual gravity of that question hitting the crowd. They all knew the answer was yes. They knew without a shadow of a doubt that they were raising swords against the son of the woman promised the highest place in heaven. He then draws an even deeper, more intimate emotional connection. He asks, "Am I not the same Hussein whom your prophet carried on his shoulders?" Now, what's really profound about this is how their reverence for the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is fundamentally tied to Hussein. Whenever these men heard Hussein's name, they remembered their beloved Prophet. They remembered the endless affection shown to this very man standing right in front of them. And then comes the final, devastating blow to their conscience. Are you not the Ummah of that same Prophet? Then why do you stand before me like this today? This question completely exposes their ultimate contradiction. I mean, how could they claim to be the followers of the Prophet Muhammad, yet stand there ready to slaughter his beloved grandson? It was an absolute betrayal of their own faith, laid entirely bare under the burning sun. Which leads us to our final part, Section 4, the echo of silence, the weight of the truth. After those words resonated across the battlefield, a profound shift happened in the atmosphere. That restless energy we talked about earlier, it completely vanished, replaced by a deep silence, lowered heads, a crowd with absolutely no answers. You have thousands of men standing there armed to the teeth, yet they are completely paralyzed by shame. Not a single person could utter a word of defense against the absolute truth Imam Hussein had just spoken. They were caught entirely in the web of their own hypocrisy. Because here is the inescapable truth of the matter. They knew they wrote those letters. They knew they begged him to come to Kufa. They knew the passionate promises they made. And deep down, in their newly awakened conscience, they knew they had abandoned the grandson of their prophet simply because they gave in to fear. The 7th of Muharram, you see, wasn't just a battle of physical strength. It was the total, devastating collapse of their moral courage. And that brings us to the profound life lesson of this expliker. It leaves us with a question we all have to ask ourselves. When fear strikes, do we stand by our promises or do we turn away? The events of Karbala aren't just ancient history. They're a timeless mirror held up to our own souls. It asks us to examine our own zamir, our own conscience. When our faith, our mercy, or our integrity is tested by fear or worldly pressure, do we hold our ground like Imam Hussein, or do we lower our heads and blend into the crowd? I want you to think deeply on that. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through history today. Until next time, keep seeking the truth.